So welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV, and thanks once again for tuning in. But before we get down to our next featured bike, I'd just like to say a quick hello to all the brand new subscribers who have recently signed up to CDB TV. So welcome aboard, and I hope you continue to find some good material here with regards looking at these old vintage dirt bikes. So right now we're going to take a look at a bike that I came across at the 2023 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. Now, many of the bikes that I've featured from this show in the past have certainly been all nicely cleaned up, and some have even been restored machines, but this next particular bike is at the opposite end of the scale and is currently waiting on being refurbished. So let's jump straight into that video now and take a look at Matt Powles' 1979 Cotton EMX 370. Now, normally here on Classic Dirt Bike TV, many of the bikes that we feature are all usually immaculately and well presented, and even some examples do look even better than they were when they were brand new, although this quite rare example here is from the other end of the concourse scale, because this 1979 British built Cotton EMX 370 is currently owned by Matt Powles, and as you can see, it's patiently waiting its turn to be restored and put back to its original 1979 condition. Now, just in case you're not aware of the Cotton motorcycle's history, Cotton had been producing bikes for many years in the UK, and during that time they had built a wide variety of road and competition bikes, but eventually they then moved the Cotton factory to Bolton, where Cotton top man and company owner at that time, Terry Wilson, then teamed up with motorcycle frame engineer Mike Etoff, who actually began his career by designing and building frames for Alan Clues at CCM before eventually leaving the company to set up building his own bikes under this Cotton EMX banner. Now, earlier versions of these bikes were actually called Cotton EMCs, or Etoff Motocross Components, but then Mike Etoff had to rename the company after it was found that there was already another business trading under the EMC trademark. So Mike then changed the name to Cotton EMX, or Etoff Motocross, just to save having a copyright legal battle in the courts. So basically it was Mike Etoff who designed all of the chassis for these bikes in his Bolton factory, which ironically wasn't actually too far from Alan Clues' CCM premises, but almost all of the other parts, including these Italian Marzocchi forks, were all sourced from outside suppliers. So the earlier versions of these EMXs in the 1970s used German Sachs engines, but in 1979 it was this well-proven Austrian-made Rotax two-stroke engine that Mike chose to power these bikes, and these engines were specifically prepared by Rotax to Mike Etoff's own specifications. But as you can see, our example here hasn't seen much love lavished on it down the years, but then again, it is quite nice to get these shots of the bike before its restoration, and who knows, we may yet be revisiting this bike in years to come after its refurbishment. But these two-stroke Rotax engines were just a superb motor, which is why they were used on so many other off-road dirt bikes in the 1970s and early 80s. Now, another one of the very few parts that EMX actually made at their Bolton premises for these bikes were these exhaust expansion chambers, which employed a very unique process to construct them, which started off as just two pieces of cut and shaped metal that were then welded down the seams and then plugged at either end and hydraulically expanded until the desired expansion chamber shape was acquired. But for its day, this was outer limits high-tech engineering. Although this alloy rear tailpipe was just another one of the exhaust parts that were sourced from other motorcycle parts suppliers. But when you take a look around our Cotton EMX, it still appears to have many of its stock original 1979 parts fitted onto it, because it still has its original wheels and that twin leading shoe front brake as well. But on the back, again, the proper 1979 hub and wheel as well. So this is all going to be a very good start for Matt when he eventually gets down to its restoration. Now, at the back end of our Etoff EMX 370, it could have been a multitude of any make or model of rear suspensions that would have been fitted onto these bikes in '79, but this bike still appears to have its original rear shocks. But certainly all of the plastics that came with these bikes in the late 1970s were all locally manufactured in Birmingham in the UK, and that of course included this rear and front mudguard as well, although this particular part on this bike looks like it's a Robert replacement item. But it certainly looks like Matt, the bike's owner, has made a bit of a start on its refurbishment with these new plastic side panels, which I have to say do look correct for its model and year. So again, these are valuable parts to have prior to its restoration taking place. But in contrast to some of the other EMX plastics that are fitted onto this bike, this plastic fuel tank here wasn't actually made in Birmingham, but this was made in Cheshire in the UK. So you can see that Mike Etoff certainly tried to make the most of his local manufacturers to help supply him with some of the parts that he needed to build his motorcycles. But this plastic made fuel cell usually held enough premixed fuel to feed that 370 two-stroke Rotax motor. And just in case you're interested, the Cotton EMX's seat was yet another part made locally in Birmingham. So as you can see, more locally produced parts on our 370. So basically, other than the bike's chassis and of course that uniquely constructed exhaust expansion chamber, almost every other component that was required to build these EMXs were bought in from outside suppliers. And I can see Mike Etoff's thinking in that respect, because this would have been a much cheaper and more cost-effective way to build the bikes rather than having them tool up his factory and make the parts themselves. But make no mistake, back in the day these were still fantastic and very quick bikes with that Etoff design chassis and of course that superb Rotax engine. And despite it being a parts bike, Mike Etoff still tried to bring in the very best off-road motorcycle parts available to put his motocrossers together. But I must say it's still quite good to get a look at an unmolested Cotton EMX example before it's all dismembered and blinged up and revitalised with some shiny new paint and maybe other fancy parts as well. But as I said, it would be quite good sometime if we could revisit Matt's bike to have a look at just how he got on with its restoration, where we could then maybe do a kind of before and after feature on how the bike turned out. But for sure, Matt's certainly got a very good canvas to start with here, because most of the bike's original parts are all still intact, which, as every motorcycle restorer knows, is half the battle. But I'm sure when Matt's bike's all finished, he'll be hoping that his machine will turn out exactly like this little beauty here, which is a fully restored 1977 EMC 250, which of course is an earlier example of the Cotton EMX, and before their name was changed to Cotton EMX. But as you can see, these earlier 1977 bikes were still using that well-proven German-made Sachs 250 two-stroke engine, and not the Rotax example that we saw on our 79 bike. So this particular bike here is another fantastic machine from the Rob Hughes classic bike collection, and this machine was fully restored by Rob's ace mechanic and bike restorer Alec Middleton, who also is responsible for many of those beautiful CCM bikes that Rob has in his collection. But in terms of originality, these bikes don't come any better than this example here, because this bike is 100% authentic and uses all of the original parts that the bike came fitted with back in 1977, including, as I said, this very quick Sachs engine with its 7-speed gearbox. But again, in case you're interested, there's already a full version video on this bike here on my YouTube channel, and also if you want a more in-depth look at this fantastic little bike, as far as I'm aware, the Australian-based VMX Vintage Motocross magazine is also shortly to run a full story on this bike as well quite soon. So if you're a regular reader of that publication, then you'll be able to check that out. But we've really just included this Rob Hughes bike here just as a bit of reference to how these Cotton bikes looked before they changed their name, and while they were still using these Sachs engines and not the more powerful 370 Rotax motors that we saw on Matt's machine. So fingers crossed, when Matt eventually gets around to stripping down and refurbishing his 1979 370, he'll have it all back looking as good as new once again. And maybe in a future video here on my channel, we'll be doing another double feature on just exactly how Matt turned this tired old 79 Cotton EMX into a beautiful concourse winning Mike Eatoff racer from the magical 1970s. So there you have it there. That's a nice British made Cotton 370 EMX belonging to Matt Powles, and as I said in the video, it would be quite good if we could revisit that bike after it's been restored. So we'll look forward to taking another look at Matt's Cotton EMX in a future video here on my channel. So coming up next, we're going to stay with the 2023 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show, and we're going to take a look at this beautiful 1966 Mark I Model 11 250 bull tackle per sang. This is another rare bike that I came across at the show, and we're going to take a look at this bike in my next video posting here on my channel. But for the time being, thanks again for tuning in to CDB TV. So until the next time, it's goodbye for now.